Protesters against plans to frack in North Yorkshire are claiming a small victory in their fight against drilling for shale gas in Rydale. It comes at the end of a week where lorries have been removing more equipment from Third Energy's site at Kirkby Misperton. The company says it will be used elsewhere while it waits for a final decision from the government on whether it can go ahead and frack at the site. We've been talking to some of the protesters.
It feels like the closest we've got to a victory at the moment. It feels like it's worth celebrating.
It's a bit of a roller coaster, really. You don't want to get too excited about things but for now it's a small bit of joy.
We've got to celebrate every little victory, and this is a victory.
Kevin Hullinrake is the Conservative MP for the area.
Well, I think it's right to be cautious. I think most people I speak to want us to be cautious, not a dash for gas like they saw in the US. They want to make sure these applications are fit for purpose, that it properly protects the environment. Most people I speak to do want to see those things, so I think people should welcome the fact that we're taking a very cautious approach to this.
Radio York, thanks for joining us today. It's mid-morning with Dom in for John, and we are talking to Mark Scott, who's very kindly come into the studio today to answer your questions. Mark's the Environment Agency Area Director for Yorkshire. So much to talk about, Mark, and a question that you'll get, or rather a topic you'll get many questions on, namely fracking. Now, Third Energy, as we know, is waiting for this. We were talking about this on the breakfast show this morning, in fact, for final approval from the government before it can carry out fracking at the site at Kirkby Misperton. You initially gave Third Energy the go-ahead with the plans. I suppose a lot of people, first of all, would like to know how that came about and why you did that.
Okay, well, I think one of the things is it's important for people to realise that our job is, like we would in any kind of situation, is actually permitting the environmental activity to make sure that that is safe. So it's not the Environment Agency per se that's saying we think fracking's a good thing, we think fracking's a bad thing. What we're saying is to a company, if you want to carry out something which might have an environmental impact, you're going to have to reassure us through the permit application process that technically that's going to be the point, and that's what we've been looking at.
Which is fair enough. The problem, surely the biggest issue with fracking is the fact that none of us really know, isn't this the unknown about it? And as regards, because each frack, one imagines the way it goes about, the geology of each particular area is always going to be slightly different, and therefore giving us that unknown, which makes it difficult each time to give a black and white yes on this occasion, no on this occasion.
Dom, you're absolutely right. It does make it difficult because everything is on a case-by-case basis. That is the point. So when we look at any application around these sorts of things, it will be on a case-by-case basis. And we have got experts in groundwater, in contaminated land, in the disposal of wastewater, radioactivity. You know, what I would say is that the people who work at the Environment Agency, their professional credibility is very, very important to them, and they joined the Environment Agency because they are passionate about the environment. So in terms of their own motivations and their own professional credibility, trust me, they will not let something go ahead if they do not think that it's environmentally sound.
Fantastic. OK, I've got a question for you here. We'll take a call in a moment. We're going to speak to Anne in just a second or two. But first of all, just have a listen to this for me, if you would, Mark.
David Brewster, I'd like to ask you whether, given the cutbacks that your service has suffered over the last few years, whether you have the capacity to deal with this increasing monitoring role in relation to fracking. Your thoughts on that?
OK. As things stand at this moment in time, I'd say yes. There are other exploration licenses out there at this, for sort of development. But in terms of the resources that I need currently, I'm satisfied that I have that. I'm satisfied that we've got the necessary expertise. And I'm also satisfied that we will build that resource if, as and when we require it.
Fair enough. OK, now look, we've got so many people waiting to speak to you today, lots of people to chat to. We're going to hear now from Simon Bowens, who's from Friends of the Earth. Morning, Simon.
Good morning, Mark.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Yes, you're through to Mark, go for it.
Hi, Simon.
Hi, Mark. So one of the key things that were promised by the government is a gold standard regulatory system. That's underpinned by some of the requirements of the Infrastructure Act, particularly around groundwater monitoring, which requires 12 months of groundwater monitoring. As you may know, we've written to the Environment Agency and we've written to the Secretary of State with expert hydrologists' report, basically identifying that some of the weaknesses in Third Energy's groundwater monitoring at Kirby Misperton. As far as we understand, the requirement for 12 months groundwater monitoring hasn't been fulfilled. Would you agree that has to be absolutely key to the operation at Kirby Misperton before that is allowed to go ahead?
Okay, so Simon, first of all, Mark, just answer us on that 12 months monitoring. What can you tell us about that?
I don't absolutely know the detail of that, Simon or Dom, but what I do know is that we have got we require the company to fulfil its monitoring plan, both in terms of air and groundwater quality. We do, and we will monitor it and review that. We have got our own equipment on site. And the point that I made before we went into the call is that I'm confident that the people that I've got monitoring this will make sure that the job is as it should be.
Well, let me ask Simon that. Simon, I wonder if you've heard what Mark says, and I have to say, looking at him face to face here, he certainly comes across as very genuine about himself and his colleagues, wanting to do what's best for the environment. Are you sceptical about that?
I have huge respect for the people working for the Environment Agency. They're doing an incredible job, but there is a question, I think, almost a tension between government policy and the regulatory system. So we've seen Greg Clark basically saying he's satisfied with the technical requirements around the KM8 development, and yet we see weaknesses and certainly gaps in the groundwater monitoring, and certainly not the 12 months continuous groundwater monitoring which is required at KM8.
Okay, well, Simon, it won't surprise you to know that I'm going to say it's not for me to comment or make government policy, but what I can promise, and I really do appreciate the comment as well that you made about my folks, by the way, is if there is any information that you don't think that you're getting, or that there are any technical issues that you wish to discuss with my team, we are here and we will speak to you.
Is that good enough for you, Simon? At least you've got a contact point there.
Yeah, I mean, we have written to your team, Mark. We've written to the Secretary of State. We're still yet to receive a satisfactory response. So,
right. Well, wait a minute. When you say satisfactory response, if you're going to have a disagreement on something, then it'll never be a satisfactory response, will it? If you've received a response that may be at odds at what you wanted, I mean that's subjective, isn't it?
I think what we'd like to see from the Environment Agency is clarification over, with regard to the KM8 site, when they suspect that appropriate groundwater monitoring was commenced.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Well,
I will take that point, Simon, and we will get back to you direct on it. Promise.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you very much, Simon. Good to hear from you. Let's just move on with some other questions here. Anne in Skelton, I'm going to cram all these in. She'd appreciate you asking Mark Scott, she says, the following question on Friday. How will the Environment Agency ensure that the regulation of hundreds of potential fracking sites across North Yorkshire is done properly? So, I mean, is this a staffing issue, for example? A lot of listeners, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say here, and I think this is what Anne's point is that they're concerned that through no fault of your own, you probably don't have enough staff to do the correct regulation when it comes to, potentially at least, lots of fracking sites. Okay.
Well, one of the things that I said to you earlier, we will approach each of these things on a case-by-case basis. But if, as and when the industry develops, and we've already got some conflicting views emerging about what the size and scale of that's going to be, we will respond to that accordingly, as we always have. Now, obviously, there is always going to be a tension. I used the phrase earlier about tightrope walking. there is always going to be a tension between what people would have us do and what we can actually do. But one of the things that I would say, and hopefully, given the drop-in centres, given the amount of attention that we've paid this site, you can see from the Environment Agency, the local team especially, that we are absolutely 100% committed to making sure that this is right, and that's the way that we intend to continue.
OK, well, let's pursue that topic a little bit more. I've got Dr. Tim Thornton on the line now, who's at Middleton near Pickering. Tim, morning to you.
Good morning, Mark.
Thanks so much for joining us. You're through to Mark.
Thanks. Mark, I've been thoughtful about the re-injection of fracking waste, either for reuse for a further frack or for disposal. There is a disposal well in Pickering, conveniently close to Caremate. Now, anything that they put down for fracking, the chemicals are very carefully controlled, non-hazardous to groundwater, quite rightly so. The maintenance chemicals are not required to fit those criteria, and it seems that there's a bit of uncertainty, a bit of wriggle room with regard to wastewater, either from early after fracking or during the production phase, because that will be injected down a well at high pressure. And if that leaks at any stage from that well, then we could end up with toxic water getting eventually into the water supply.
Seems quite a powerful comment from Tim there. What do you make of that?
Tim, that's a really detailed question, and I'm not going to intend to dodge it, but what I will say is, if anything that comes out of the fracking operation is regarded as waste, in terms of re-injection or in terms of clean-up, that will be subject to all of the usual environmental controls. So we will not allow a re-injection of something that we don't think meets the standards that we need to see. So,
Tim, am I right in thinking here, and Mark, you tell me as well, again, it's going back to the unpredictable nature of fracking, with the water being forced underground as it is. We're not altogether sure. No one can predict really where it'll end up.
Well, my problem is that we know that the water contains a lot of unpleasant chemicals when it comes up from the deep layers. Not just the fracking chemicals have gone down, right, but more concern about the actual chemistry of the shale. Now, if it comes up and the radioactivity and the heavy metals are disposed of through water treatment, then at least you've got an element of control about it. But if you put it back for reuse down the well for refracturing, then we have got the problem that is not non-hazardous to groundwater, but it is actually potentially very unpleasant if it gets into the water supply. So there's a difference between the rather bland chemicals that they intend to use for fracking initially, yep, and the toxic, carcinogenic and all the rest of it water that will be at present perhaps permitted for a refracturing.
Right, so my response to that, Tim, is the water that comes out needs to be, and I take your point, you're absolutely right, because it's coming from such depth, it's such old geology, it will be saline, it's likely to have radioactivity in it at certain levels, it's likely to have heavy metals. Now, that would need to be cleaned up. And you can't, if you think about this, just constantly re-inject it, because what you'd be doing is concentrating up, which is, I think, maybe one of your fears or points. And the issue with that, of course, is that the more you do that, the higher the likelihood is that you will impact upon the actual process itself.
Now,
the company itself wouldn't want that.
Okay, I was going to say that's a fair point, but it's all going back to the original question, isn't it, Tim, of monitoring. How can you ensure that, maybe this will be fine early on and you'll find that if fracking goes ahead, all the rules will be obeyed and stuck to. The issue will be maybe 18 months down the line, we suddenly discover to our horror that actually shortcuts are being taken. You know, it's all about the closeness of the monitoring, isn't it?
Actually, the Environment Agency there is saying that they will be concerned about the impact of the water, the reused water, on the actual process of fracturing. Now, the company doesn't want to block their little perforations, but I don't care about the company's perforations. I care about the health and well-being of the people who are drinking water that might have that wastewater contaminating it.
And so do I, Tim, and so do we. At the end of the day, there's absolutely no way that we'd want to permit, or we would permit, anything which would impact upon people's water supplies.
So will you be doing full chemistry before any water is re-injected?
We will be doing the amount of environmental monitoring that the technical experts that work for me feel is necessary in order to protect any vulnerable water supplies. Absolutely.
So that's a no. You won't be doing the full chemistry on all the water.
Well, it didn't sound like
it didn't sound like a no. In fairness,
to me,
no,
actually.
Tim. Listen, Tim, we have to move on. We've got a lot
you.
of people. Thank you so much for your call and appreciate the comments and your chance you've had to speak to Mark as well. We've got another caller now. This is Professor Cowan, who's from Oswald Kirk. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Don.
Thank you so much for joining us. What would you like to say to Mark?
I'm interested in why it is that a significant number of trucks with wastewater have already been leaving the site. It's said, Third Energy say that they haven't been doing any hydraulic fracturing, and so I'm not quite sure why significant amounts of water would need to be taken away from the well.
Can I ask you how you know this?
Yes, I mean, people at the gate have been saying that these trucks have been leaving.
So it's anecdotal then?
It is anecdotal, yes, but it seems to be fairly reliable.
Okay, Professor Cowan, that may actually be the case. If there are trucks leaving the site with wastewater, then that wastewater will be going to somewhere where it is correctly treated.
Yes.
You know, my team are not blind to the importance of this site and the, if you like, the expectations of the population at Kirkby Misperton that we are all over it.
Sure. I understand, but what my question really is, why would there be any wastewater being produced at the moment? So Third Energy say they have not done any hydraulic fracturing, and any puncturing of the well has presumably been going into impervious shale rock. So
right, we don't.
Any wastewater?
It's important to point out we don't actually know this for facts, do we? This is anecdotal. In fairness,
yes.
And I'm sure you'd understand that.
Want to understand where it's coming from.
Okay, Professor Cowan, there could be a variety of things that are happening on the site, which could mean that the company is producing, I don't know, wastewater in inverted commas, which they feel they're having to dispose of. I don't know. But in terms of your specific inquiry, again, I'll ask the team, and if that's the case, there will be an explanation.
Okay.
I can absolutely tell you that there will not be things leaving that site that shouldn't be. And if we find out there are, then we would take action against that. So, you know, I think the company itself would be pretty stupid to start trying to do something like that when they know that not only people like you but people like us are watching their every move.
Good to know. Right, we must move on because we're running out of time with you. Let's talk a little bit about bathing water, in particular in Scarborough. Lots of people, you know, our seasides with the blue flag schemes, etc. People are always looking at that. How much monitoring do you do of seawater on the East Coast beaches, Mark?
Okay, well, we monitor the bathing waters in terms of the Bathing Water Directive. What does that mean? That means at least 20 samples per year at every bathing water that we've got up and down the coast. So that's the baseline monitoring, if you like, which sort of gives us a kind of an indication of bathing water quality. So generally speaking, across the beaches of Yorkshire, we've seen in my lifetime, in my career, that improve, generally speaking, out of all recognition.
What are the issues you face on that front, though? Presumably, you'll come across unscrupulous people who will illegally maybe stick a pipe into the sea, etc. Or,
to be honest with you, I'm trying to think about whether or not we have actually come across anybody ever unscrupulously sticking a pipe into the sea. The sea's a pretty dynamic environment, and I think it'd probably be pretty difficult to do that. But there is no doubt that if I think about our history and all the rest of it, there's a history potentially of people connecting pipes into other pipes, which go into a pipe that go into the sea, for example. So we do see inputs, if you like, into bathing waters that come from a whole variety of potential sources.
Right, you're on a sort of very simple front though. If people go to the sea this summer, then bathing is absolutely something to be recommended, is it, as far as you're concerned, health-wise?
It is across nearly all of the bathing waters in Yorkshire. We have at the moment a particular issue with Scarborough South. One of the things that we picked up in terms of our monitoring at Scarborough South is that there is an issue there, we think, in terms of bathing water quality, which we have conducted an investigation along with our partners, and we're working on that one now as we speak.
Okay.